Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to use Apollo GraphQL in iOS to call a remote GraphQL server. So we're going to do this in 7 steps outlined right here. So we're going to install Apollo using the Swift Package Manager, the new Swift Package Manager, exciting. Add syntax highlighting plugins, which is optional, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Use command line interface to download the schema, and the schema is a big JSON file that essentially maps out your GraphQL calls for an Apollo app. So the specific JSON format, there's a few different formats. I'm not going to get into too much detail because it's pretty involved. You have to know a couple different technologies for this. Not that you have to know. That leads me to the next step. Create queries and migrations in the GraphQL files. You're using a different language there, but it's not a difficult one. Like if you're good with Swift, you can use this. You're gonna create an API.swift file using a run script that's in that you put into Xcode. It's all provided for you by Apollo. It's a little complicated, but Apollo makes using this technology a lot easier. And we're going to add an instance of Apollo to the AppDelegate with our link to our remote database. And then we're going to call the Apollo methods in our ViewController. And as you see here, you're using command line interface, remote GraphQL server, and the Apollo framework. So let's get started, and we're going to work with the brand new Swift Package Manager. But before we did that, we want to introduce you to the starter project here. Here you have the main storyboard, which always takes forever to load. But in it, basically, you have a table view controller, and you have a custom cell that has these labels that you see here in the storyboard, and they're already all linked up. And in the table view controller, it's just generic table view stuff. We'll be messing with all these functions. So go to the link in my description. If you've ever worked with my videos before, that's how it works. In the description, and get the starter branch of this GitHub link or whatever. The link will take you straight to the starter branch, or it should. So yeah, make sure you download the starter one, or you download the whole repo and then check out the starter one, however you like to do it. Exciting. Unless you're watching this in like 2025 and it's actually like, oh well, I haven't used the package manager in 15 years. We just beam the packages in with our eyeballs, like something. But yeah, so we're gonna go file here, Swift packages, add package dependency, and what we want to do here is want to say Apollo, and then make sure it's the one Apollo GraphQL. Who's Groove Deluxe? Was it just like forked? Let's see. Yeah, that's weird. But alright, yeah. As you see, last updated yesterday. Constantly updated. And legit. It's updated by someone I know who is really good at iOS. She's a good follow on Twitter. Lynn Shapiro. So yeah. Check that out if you have time. Designated Nerd. If you're a Twitter person, that's her handle. But yeah, so once we pick and we want to update to minor, let me make sure I did that. Make sure every minor update that it updates, because it's good practice when you see something like yeah, up to next minor. See, it's waiting to go to 1.0. So you want to say up to next minor, so where it updates at 0.19.0. And yeah, you just kind of gotta keep an eye on what. But yeah, so you just want to use the Apollo package. You can always add the other two later, but for this we just need the one. And there it is. It's added. It's pretty sweet. A lot better than using CocoaPods and having to manage dependencies that way. Kind of a pain. But CocoaPods was great. It did its job very effectively, and we thank them for it. But yes, Swift Package Manager is great. Now, what we're going to do is add syntax highlighting. So this is the optional step, but it is kind of useful. I do think that the syntax isn't to where, it's not like got like the autocomplete kind of stuff and doesn't do formatting, but it helps a little bit to be able to reference your other variables that you've created again and make sure they're spelled right and everything. So in order to do that, if you don't already have a folder in library to developer to Xcode, I didn't even have the Xcode folder. Just create a folder for plugins and a folder for specifications. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag the plugins and specs provided by Apollo into these folders. So we're going to clone the repo for Xcode-GraphQL. That's found right here. And I'm just gonna, download that. I've actually already downloaded it. Create a new tab here, and we're going to app development, repos. There they are. So take this IDE plugin and put it in the plugins folder, and then take this GraphQL.xclang spec, put that in the specifications folder. And that is the completion of step 2. Also, you have to close Xcode. I'd recommend doing it before you even create the folder, do any of that stuff. To completely quit out of Xcode and then rerun it, it's going to give you a pop-up saying, are you sure, do you want to run this plugin or whatever? And yeah, just say yes and you'll have it. You'll never have to answer that question again. Now, so if you remember step 3, it was to add a schema JSON file into our app, and you can find that if it's remote. You can use this handy command line tool here, and it's going to download. So let's go ahead and CD into the folder we want to download it in. CD desktop. And then we're going to use Node Package Manager to install the GraphQL Schema command line tool. So it's going to sudo npm install get-graphql-schema. It's going to say it's already installed or something, because I already have mine installed, but I wanted to go ahead and type it and see, and so that maybe you don't have to pause the video, and if you do, it's right there for you, so where I don't have to delete every line. But that's cool. It updated it. That's cool. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to download the schema, and in order to do that, get GraphQL.schema, and then we're going to use the link right here is where we put it. So take your remote API and copy and paste the API link into here. I'm going to do that right now. And for this, by the way, I used a GraphQL remote GraphQL database because it was free and easy to use. Did everything I needed to. But that's going to be sunset in 2020. Now they have another one called Prisma, something like that does the same thing, but it's essentially the next level of GraphQL. But the website I used is graph.cool. I have a video on setting up a thing on GraphQL, unfortunately, because again, it'll be gone in a year. So You know, that's the thing about technology, is it's always changing, and it's a cool thing and good thing, and also you have to change with it. The videos don't always have keeping power, so there is my API. And then we want it in the form of JSON because it comes in a few different forms. If you want to get into GraphQL more in depth, you know, feel free to Google it. So after that, we need to put a greater than sign. If you see all this, it's because I cut it out of the video, but I didn't put the greater than sign, and it didn't process it correctly. It just printed out the schema in my command line. So that means to download it to, again, whatever you're CD'd into. And there we go. So on my desktop now, there is a schema.json file that takes a second to upload it. It was, while I was saying, I was looking at my desktop like, oh, where is it? But yes, here it is. Pull it up for you. There. So you don't want to write all this code with it. 3,400 lines. Yeah, so there it is. And we're just going to drag that file into our copy items if needed. Whatever. Yeah, let's put that in this folder. You want to make sure that it's in the proper folder, and you want to make sure that you copy it. As with, like, I've never done something where I don't need to copy the items if checked. Not true. I have in this very tutorial. This is the first time, because we run a script that that allows you create an API file using a run script, and because it's already in the folder, you don't copy it. You just kind of reference it. But anyway, let's go to the next step, and we're going to create some mutations and queries in GraphQL in our app. According to the Apollo framework's recommendation, and it sounds like a good idea also, we're going to create a file with the same name as our Swift file that we're going to be calling it in. So for us, it's GraphQL table ViewController. And in here, we're going to find empty file, just total empty file. And we're going to name it GraphQL table ViewController .GraphQL. I'm going to put it in this file, target GraphQL. Perfect. There we go. Let's just put it up here. There we go. And we're going to add some stuff in GraphQL's language, which is really simple. Again, I'm not going to go too into depth here, but let's add a query called load contacts. And in that query, query all contacts. And these are terms that GraphQL actually uses. So this first one up top is saying what do you want the function to be called in your app? This one is saying, what function am I going to speak to the server to tell it to give me? So all contacts is a function in GraphQL, and then we're going to do ellipses and then contact details, which is also something that is speaking to GraphQL. Let's do tab. I like to keep everything orderly here. And so that'll basically pull all the contact details. Contacts is a member of our database, and we're also going to we want to take parts of the contact. So say if we wanted the name or the number individually from the contacts, we can't do it like this, or it's not efficient really on your back end to do it like this. What you need to do is create fragments where you can pull each one individually, pull each piece of data individually. That's really what GraphQL, that's their advantage over REST APIs. So, I mean, why would you do it if you weren't if you weren't using like fragmentation or mutations in the proper way? But whatever, we're going to fragment contact details on contact. And so where I put contact, you put whatever you're looking to do, or if you're following a tutorial, great. And we're going to say we want the ID, we want the name, we want number, we want the created at date, we want updated at. Just add it all in. It doesn't take up too much space to add this stuff, and then if you need it, you don't have to recreate the API file that we're going to create. And that's why we're doing this first, because the API file is unique to what the queries are. Now we're going to have a mutation, which is just like a query, if you're not familiar, except it's like a post. So query is like a GET, a GET request, and mutation is like a post request. Now I say that, but like a query is really also a post request, and just like like the standard when you call it, but you can also call GET. But anyway, that's getting a little in the weeds. Mutation edit name, and then we want to put this $ for whatever we're going to inject, and colon, and then the type of it, so ID, and we're going to make it required, because you want to pair the ID with the name that you're changing. And then we're going to name variable, input variable that is a string, and also required. And then this is where we actually call our specific function, and it's going to be update contact. Contact. And then the ID that we put in is going to be that ID input. The name is going to be the name input. And what do we want to get out of it? So think about when we're calling this database, it has created at and updated at, or automatically updated and generated for you. ID is automatically generated, but it won't be changing. So when we change the name, it's going to bring up the updated at. It's going to change that as well, and we're displaying that in our ViewController here. So we want that to be updated when we call it. You know what I mean? So we want to return the new name, which that will, and we also want to return updated at. And so that'll do it for that one. The next mutation is edit number, and it's very similar to edit name. So we're just going to do that, change it to number, and then we've got $number, and that is an integer. And you set it up to whatever kind of variable it is in your GraphQL project. So number, and again, you're calling update contact. You're calling the same function on the GraphQL side. You just want to put in different variables, take different ones out. So number, and that's what we're going to do here. You can also create, delete, all that stuff. That's involves more like working with functions and all that stuff. So I'll just show you how to update things, because that's kind of if you know how to update things, like update and call things at the same time, that's the most complex that this language really gets, is this. So we should be good. Now the next thing we're going to do is create an API.swift file using a run script. Now that run script is given to you by Apollo. So if you go here to Apollo's site, you can see it gives you in the installation thing. This is also really good to go through. It's pretty similar to what I'm saying here, but the difference is we're using a remote database for this. This is also a good one to do if you're using a local database. Now the Swift Package Manager run script, we're just going to copy all this and we're going to paste it into a new build. See, it gives you the steps here too. Appreciate that, guys. So yeah, we're going to go into GraphQL, select the target. We're going to go to build settings, build phases. I'm going to add a new run script phase. This run script will be called generate Apollo GraphQL API. And this API basically gets the GraphQL side of things to talk to your Swift stuff. So in here, we're going to just paste what we copied. And that's it. That's all we got to do. We have to move this up before compile sources so that when we build the app, it automatically does this. And so we're going to go to Product, Build. Now we're going to right-click here, Show in Finder, open up our file folder, and you can see there's an API.swift file. Remember how I mentioned I've never not had to copy the items if needed? Well, this one, we actually don't copy the items if needed because it's already in our folder. We just want to add to the target because it isn't yet added. So there we go. API, and again, aren't you glad you didn't have to write all this? It's a lot of stuff, and you can go through it to see exactly how it's working. It's really it's mapping things to the JSON output, and yeah, so that's all really helpful. Now the next step is to add a reference in our AppDelegate for Apollo. So we want to import Apollo, and then up here we're going to create a constant for Apollo. Apollo. It's going to be Apollo client, and URL is going to be a URL, and we're going to, it's actually a string, and the string is our API key, and you want to use the simple key. GraphQL's got like subscriptions, stuff like that. A little out of the scope for this tutorial. This is just the simple API key again, and there it is. So we have the Apollo client. We're just going to force unwrap this. Because the API is going to be there, or the URL, like, you know what I mean. So even if the URL doesn't pull, it's going to throw an error in Apollo, not here. So anyway, our last step. Finally, you get to write some more Swift, and we're going to go into this Swift file. We're going to add a load data where you query all the data from your database, and that is this first one is the one we're going to talk to, and it's in the API file, the actual what they call everything, like the syntax for it. But for now, let's just get through it. We're going to create a contacts variable that is an array of the data that we get from the load contacts query. So data.allContact, because it says all contacts, and then it simplifies, takes that S off, and then it's going to be did set and table view dot reload data. So every time, it's basically listening, and we'll reload the table view every time that something updates. We're also going to call a load data function. And for that, we're going to use a watcher. And that's another actual variable. I want to put it up here. Variable watcher, just in case we need it again. GraphQL query watcher. And why can't we do that yet? Because we haven't imported Apollo. And that is a generic load context query. And there we go. We're good there. Now in load data, we're going to reference that watcher equal to Apollo. This is our instance in the AppDelegate. Apollo.watch. And the query is going to be load context query. And here's the result handler. Result and then the two cases for GraphQL. So result is success and failure. So we're going to have Xcode automatically create that. It's nice that they do that, right? And then success is let new results. Create a constant there, and then we're going to create let error here. Error. And then self.context, because we're in a closure, equals new result dot data dot all contacts. And in case of failure, we want to print error loading contacts. And then print error localized description. So there we go. That is our first function. Now our next function is in the commented out alert item here. So we're going to highlight it all, command slash to uncomment, mass uncomment. And so there's a little pseudocode in here. We're going to move that around. We want to match like name text field equals name. So where are we getting this name data from? What we need to do is create an instance of contact. It's a cardlet because it's an optional. And it's going to be equal to our contacts. And doing a lot of optional chaining in this bad boy, so get ready. Index path dot row. And as you know, index path is already a variable up here, so we're referencing that one. Dot fragments dot contact details. So now once we go in here, let's do an else. Fail error. Couldn't find contact at row. Index path dot row. Perfect. So once we do this const, you'll see dot notation for contact details has all name, number, ID, all that stuff that we need. So we're going to be referencing that in a second. The next thing we're going to, in the mutation, we're going to change the cells data. So we're going to create an instance of the cell. And since we're in a table view function, it's easy to do. Table view.cell for row at our current index path. And we want it to be as a contact table view cell so that we can reference the other stuff we have inside it, like name label, number label, etc. Next thing we're going to do to make our code a little bit safer is we're going to create guardlets for our name and number inputs. So guardlet name equal contacts dot name, else fatal error, unable to get name. We're going to do the same thing for number. Card let number equals contacts dot number, else unable to get number. Now we're going to go in here and do our mutations. Change it from placeholder. Actually, this will be text. I'll put it as text in your starter file. And yeah, if I don't get around to it, just make sure change placeholder to text there. Makes this makes a little more sense. So when you hit the submit, update button, whatever, you want to make sure these numbers are equal. So let's wrap this to make it a string. There we go. And so let's start with the name mutation. They're of course going to be very similar. I'm going to set card let new name equals name text field dot text, else unable to get name text field text. Pretty self-explanatory. Apollo.perform, and this is where we're performing mutation. We want it to, it's the edit name mutation, and it should already have that. Yeah, perfect. Our ID is contact, our current contact.id, and the name is our new name that is in textfield.text. See, because if it's changed, if there's, if they don't equal, then, there's a new one, and so we need to do something with the new one. And let's say result in and create us a closure here. It's going to be similar to the query, so switch results, and then just have it autofill. Successes let result data. Cell dot updated label, which is the updated at label, dot text needs to equal our result data dot data, oops, dot update contact dot updated at. And this is one of the beauties of GraphQL, is that you can, when you're calling this, it's just one call that gives you all this stuff. They got a lawyer, I'm sure they have a lawyer that says this stuff everywhere, but it's one call, that's all. And that's essentially GraphQL's thing. And equals result data dot update contact dot name. Alright, and then the failure is let error, and then fatal error, we're going to say our edit name mutation didn't work. And I'm using a lot of fatal errors. You might not, you might want to log them, just for if you're in like a production app or something like that. Instead of crashing the app, but for us at this point, learning how to do something, crashing the app is good. So there we go. We're done with that one, and we're going to say number text field does not equal number. We're going to do basically the same thing. Yard let new number. If you want to pause it and try it out yourself before I do all this crap, or stuff, yeah, it's not crap. It's pretty sweet, but anyway, we're going to cast this number. It's coming out as a string, so we're going to cast it into an integer. Number text field dot text. Else another fatal error, unable to get number text field. Then we're going to Apollo.perform, edit number mutation. ID is contact.id, and number is our new number. And then, oh, right here we need to say result in. And then we're going to, same thing, switch results. And then just let it complete it for us. Oh, come on. Switch must be exhaustive. Yeah. Let result data. And I say cell.updatedLabel.text. This is going to be exactly the same as the one up there. Result data update contacts updated at, and then cell.name label, not name, whoops, number label, number label dot text equals result data dot update contact dot number. Perfect. And then the last thing is let error. Oh yeah, we got to do some optional chaining here. We got to put in it as a string, blah blah blah. So if it doesn't come up, let's just give it a default value of 0, 0, 0, 0. Just, you know, and if it fails, you know that that's why. And then we're going to throw a fatal error saying edit number mutation didn't work. And we're going to error.localize description. And there you have it. That's basically it, right? So there's a few last things we need to do. I created a ViewWillAppear function called load data, and we need to change all the stuff in the table view functions in order to display it in the UI. So yeah, there was a number of sections in here that I deleted. I'll change that in the starter repo where it'll already be deleted. So whatever, why'd I even say that? Number of rows in section is going to be, we're going to return our contacts.count, and it's an optional, so we're going to say 0 if there isn't a count. And now we're going to configure our cell for row at index path. We're going to say as contact table view cell. And let's turn this into a guardlet. I just always, you know, being careful. Then else fatal error couldn't dequay contact cell. I like mispronouncing things on purpose because sometimes it's funny. Guardlet contact equals contact. We're going to do similar to what we did in that other function. Contacts.indexPath.row. Oh, not dot. That would be why it's not showing up. next path.row dot fragments dot contact details. Else, I don't know why the autocorrect was having some issues there. Oh, now it's coming back. Usually it's quick to add stuff, throw stuff like that in there for me. Whatever. Couldn't find contact at row index path.row. Perfect. So now we're just going to cell.nameLabel.text equals contact.name. Cell.numberLabel.text equals contact.number. And you know what? They're going to make us do all this stuff with the string. So I'm just going to come down here and... Oh, that's a different... Oh, man. So I have to wrap this one up. Ugh. I know this video is getting kind of long, so I want to speed it up any way I could. But, yeah. And we're going to have to default value for this. So if it's not pulling up, you know why, or you can see why. Or you can see that it's happening. Actually, cell created label.text, and again, the created at and updated at are automatically created by the database when you add something, which is kind of cool. Updated contact dot updated at. So now let's build and run. Make sure this works. Here we go. I just have one thing in the database just to test it out. And that's not right. Do a little troubleshooting here. See what we need to change. And yeah, okay, yeah, these boilerplate text I put in here. Name, and then number. So now let's build. It should be good now. Here we go. Michael, make me sound more official here. There we go, and then you can see this changed. My name changed, and it also changed the updated time, which I think is pretty cool. And just for consistency of UI, everything works, but let's just say updated label. We're going to want to add updated and let's just copy and paste that to speed it up a little bit. And unable to update updated at variable. And let's just copy and paste the whole thing again. Jeez. Okay. One last time, because we're about 45 minutes in. A little longer than I wanted to go, but I can't, there was really no way to go short about this. There's a lot of different stuff here. I understand it might be a lot to take in, but there's a lot of companies right now. Twitch is moving into GraphQL. Anything that uses a large amount of API calls can save a lot of money using GraphQL instead of API, just RESTful API stuff. So 8675309. I don't remember who did that song, but there it is, and it's updated in the database too. I've already checked to make sure that works. So there you have it. If you liked the video, click subscribe. I'm putting these kind of videos out all the time. And hit me up on Twitter if you'd like to, at Miles of Tweets. And yeah, that's about it. Take it easy, and good luck in your GraphQL future.